In today's video, guys, I'm going to go over 10 tips for learning Japanese. Learning Japanese can, of course, be daunting at times. These tips will hopefully help you stick with it. I'll go through what's worked for me and what I continue to implement pretty much on a daily basis. Thank you, Crow. Cruxay de gozaimasu. Come along with me for an educational video. Weather is absolutely beautiful today, so decided to go for a bit of a walk in the Aoyama Daen, the Aoyama Ghost Park, or otherwise known as a cemetery. Hopefully not pissing off any spirits by shooting here today, but it's a lovely park, gigantic cemetery in the middle of Tokyo, smack dab in the middle of Tokyo, Minato-ku, and tons of sakura all over the place, blooming early this year. So I figured I'd show you guys around a little bit and shoot outside today. I'm sure this video would hopefully be useful for anyone who's learning Japanese at any level, whether or not you're just starting out or you've been at it for a couple of years and have a JLPT under your belt. All right, without further ado, let's get into the video. Tip number 1, start small. It can be easy to overestimate where you stand, especially if you've been informally studying for several years. Let's put it into context. Just because I can look at some 300-pound meathead who's benching their body weight at the gym, it doesn't mean that I too can do that just by watching them do it.
It's as satisfying to me as coming is.
You need to start where you're at, and a good benchmark might be starting by just taking a mock test on the JLPT website. Maybe start low, aim for the N5 or N4, wherever you feel you're at, and adjust from there. And don't set yourself up for failure out the gates by expecting to be speaking in full sentences straight away. Just start out with the basics, and this will hopefully leave you not feeling so frustrated and overwhelmed right away. Tip number 2, start learning with an interest or hobby in mind. Basically pairing your language learning with a topic that you're already quite interested in and passionate about in your native language. This makes it a lot easier and a lot more fun to learn another language. For me, I was really into tennis around the time I started learning Japanese formally in university, and I consumed pretty much anything tennis related I could get my hands on and just started building my vocabulary and my knowledge of Japanese around tennis initially. Tenipuri for life. Tip number 3, find your zone. Have a dedicated Japanese study zone, whether that be a spot in your room, a cafe, or even a music playlist on your phone that you can load up when you want to focus on your studies. For me, what did it was I essentially lived at Starbucks in university and studied there so much that actually the staff joked that I should just get a job there since I'm there so much, and I actually did. I actually ended up working at that Starbucks for about 2.5 years. It was practically my second home. If I'm being honest, probably my first home. As for music, whatever works for you guys, whatever you do you, whatever gets you in the zone, allows you to focus and be laser focused. I prefer to listen to instrumental music, no vocals, nothing too calm or too intense, somewhere in that medium zone. Definitely nothing you're listening to for the first time, as that would probably demand too much mental attention. Shut up, man. Sometimes what really works for me is just putting one song that I'm really into on repeat, and I'll listen to that 100+ times in one study session. Tip number 4, stop making it hard on yourself. Stop telling yourself that Japanese is hard and start telling yourself it's easy. Free your mind. The Matrix was a movie that was so influential to me. All I can think of for this tip is basically saying, that scene where the little boy says there is no spoon. Literally, that means to me to look past the problem and understand that there is no problem at all and actually you're the problem. So get out of your own way and allow yourself to actually enjoy and don't stress yourself out simply because something is challenging.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible.
Basically what I'm trying to say is more of a Bill and Ted Keanu rather than a Neo Keanu. Is don't beat yourself up and understand that language learning is a journey that starts with you, and just focus on getting better day by day for yourself, not for anyone else or anything else. I remember early days when I was studying at that Starbucks I had mentioned earlier in the video, that I would have plenty of people, countless people who I knew, who I didn't know, who would come up to me and ask, hey, what are you studying there? Every time I'd tell them Japanese, they would just give me this look and say like, good luck, buddy. Good luck with that one. Japanese is hard. Yeah, well, look who's laughing now. Ha 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 ha. Me, I'm the one who's laughing now, in case that wasn't obvious. Moving on, guys, tip number 5, take a break. Immersion is good and all, and I'm all for throwing yourself in the deep end and just learning it, but you need to give your brain a rest every now and then. Otherwise, your brain will literally retract to that of a 6-year-old, and which you probably aren't a 6-year-old, and if you are, you probably shouldn't be watching this video. I say bad things sometimes. Unplug every so often, go out with friends, do something completely unrelated to Japanese. It will not only give you a healthy balance of life and studying, but it will also reinforce what you have learned if you completely unplug and allow what you have learned to actually sink into your brain instead of just cramming as much Nihongo in there as possible. Hey guys, hope you've been enjoying up until this point. The next tips will be a little bit more high level, so I hope you stick around and hope you learn something. If you are enjoying and you did learn something useful, please don't forget to subscribe, and it would mean a lot to me. Please do let me know your study tips in the comments below. Now back to the video. Tip number 6, explain it in Japanese. This is a bit more of a advanced technique for those of you who are Chukyu or Jokyu learners. If you have the ability to speak some Japanese at this point, when learning new words or even reinforcing old ones, instead of just doing your basic one-to-one Nihongo to Eigo, your Japanese to English translation, try and actually instead explain the Japanese word in Japanese. For example, sakura, as we all know, is sakura, or cherry blossom in English. Instead, maybe try saying something along the lines of 冬から春になってる時期の木に咲いたとても美しいピンク色の花です. If you can do this, you're one step closer to actually speaking Japanese rather than just studying Japanese. Tip number 7, find a study buddy. Ideally, this person could be your rival, someone who is quite similar to you in language ability in their study journey, and someone who could be seen as healthy competition for you. Keyword is healthy. That person for me was, of course, none other than the Fab star. Fab is someone who, if you are familiar with this channel, you may know. I'll post a prior, very old video showing you who Fab is. If you do not know, that's a good one. Have a look. Fabian was someone who was always just a little bit better than me in everything he applied himself to in the Japanese language. Always scored a little bit better on tests than I did. Was always a little bit more confident in his spoken Japanese than I was. And I guess in return, as his rival, I boosted his confidence. Nah, if I'm being honest, I think that my spoken casual Japanese was a little bit better than his, and we, of course, the most important point was that we continued to push each other to get better all the time. So that's how we were rivals. I think there was always this competitive nature where I was always on his tail, so to speak, and he never wanted to let his guard down. So we were always keeping each other in check that way. Just a note on this one, if you do have a rival or a study buddy who you have greatly surpassed, and that is relatively apparent, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but if it's quite obvious that you have gone leaps and bounds ahead of this person, it's probably better to move on from that person as a rival / study buddy. The main reason for this is if your main goal is to improve and you're doing nothing but teaching things that you already know, then that could be quite difficult. It would also put a bit of a strain on the friendship, so probably best to cut ties with that person as a study buddy, however possible, not as a friend. Tip number 8, diversify your input. It's great if you have a favorite anime, manga, drama, artist, musician, band, that you like to follow and consume everything for, but don't only consume pop culture. I'm not saying don't consume it, but don't only consume it. Reason being, it's generally quite unrealistic. The language is usually a lot more artistic or overly exaggerated. It's not really what's used in everyday language or everyday communication. For this, I'd suggest a number of things. Speak to a Japanese person if you have one on hand. That would probably be the best one. Read a newspaper, a book, or even look up a subject you know very little about, just to stretch you outside of your comfort zone. Getting comfortable with the language is the enemy, and there's always more to know. I've been studying for more than 15 years on and off, and there's still new words, new phrases, new grammar that I learn almost on a daily basis. So just never get comfortable just with what you know. Continue to expand outside of that. Tip number 9, be okay sounding like an idiot. I still sound like an idiot nearly 15 years after starting to study the Japanese language. Listen guys, the bar only gets higher the more you speak, and I was a bit of a perfectionist for the first 3-4 years of my language learning journey, and that really detracted from my ability to improve at a more rapid rate, so don't make the same mistakes I did. I was of the mindset, going back to tip number 1, that I was going to start big, and after I had learned enough, I was just going to impress everybody with all my extremely advanced vocabulary and grammar and all that great stuff. Little did I know that I was doing nothing but self-sabotaging, and I didn't want to speak until everything I knew I was saying was absolutely perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to sound stupid. The truth of the matter is, the more Japanese that you can speak and understand, the higher the bar is and the more pressure you're going to feel to speak perfectly, unfortunately. So don't be afraid of saying something wrong, as that will only limit your ability to learn the language faster. This tip reminds me of a story back in my 3rd year of Japanese studies at university. I was up against a native Japanese speaker who by all means should not have been in that class. You know who you are, Amy. And I had never really felt more humiliated in my entire life. Picture me at this point, maybe about 5 years into informal and formal language learning, still a perfectionist, still not really wanting to say anything unless I know it's absolutely perfect, versus a native speaker of the language in a debate. She basically handed my ass to me on a platter and obliterated me and made me doubt everything I had worked for in the last 4 to 5 years of my life studying Japanese. But fortunately, I had enough introspect at that time to realize that she wasn't doing it to beat me up or to humiliate me. She was simply doing it to win and to get the better grade, and I don't blame her for it. Instead of doing what most people would probably do at that point in time and just throw in the towel and absolutely quit, I did the exact opposite and leaned into it, knowing that her intentions were not ill in any way whatsoever, and actually went out for drinks with her, became quite good friends, and she has been one of the many people who have helped me improve my Japanese to this day. So thank you for that, Amy. And finally, tip number 10, guys, what you've been waiting for. Check out my video on 3 best tools for Japanese language learning. Shameless plug. Saw it coming, didn't you? That's it for the video today, guys. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful day in downtown Tokyo. Best of luck to you with your studies wherever you are. And if you did get any value out of this video, please do hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and leave me a comment below if there was anything I missed. That is a great tip for studying Japanese. That's it for this time, guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. God damn, so many friggin' planes.